is EWA Radio, the official podcast of the Education Writers Association, and I'm public editor Emily Richmond. February 22nd is National Student Press Freedom Day, sponsored by the Student Press Law Center, based at the University of Florida's Bruckner Center. We're going to mark it two ways here at EWA Radio. First up, we'll talk with Riya Vyas of Milpitas, California, who won the SPLC's inaugural Student Press Freedom of Information Award for her dogged investigation of how a local school district handled allegations of misconduct against two teachers lodged by multiple students. And we'll also be joined later in this episode by Mike Hiestand, SPLC's longtime legal counsel, to talk about why student journalism matters now more than ever. So let's get started. First up, Riya Vyas, whose prize-winning 2023 reporting was for The Union, the student newspaper at Milpitas High School in Northern California. She's now in her first year at UC Berkeley. Riya, welcome to EWA Radio.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
A little background for our listeners. How did this story land on your desk as a student journalist?
So the story came to me the way that a lot of stories do in high school, which is through kind of rumors, just students talking about rumors that may or may not have been blown out of proportion. And it was intriguing. It's often difficult to pursue stories that seem so kind of outlandish, and it seems like it would be really difficult to try and dig into them. But this approached me towards the end of my junior year of high school, and I decided, why not just give it a shot? I was working on other stories at the same time, and I thought, even if this doesn't go anywhere, might as well. So I started to kind of try to look into it.
We should point out that the two teachers in question, neither of them has been charged with any kind of criminal offense. There's no pending litigation against them, although they both have separated and left the district. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. I haven't checked up recently about whether there have been any charges. However, I do believe that for one teacher specifically, there was an attempt to press charges and the district attorney decided not to. So I believe that case definitely has not gone through.
And right away, this is a sensitive topic. You're talking about a student asking questions about a professional, about someone who's in a position of authority in a way. And what was the response to the school administration to your original inquiries?
So originally, I had contacted a few students who expressed interest and actually agreed to be interviewed. This was again back in my junior year when I first picked up the story. And I had a date and time set to interview those students and everything. And then they, I believe, reached out to administration because administration had told them, you're not allowed to talk to anyone about this process that you're going through. And then they reached out for permission to talk to me, and the administration told them not to. So they backed out. So that was the initial administrative response. I don't believe that they directly tried to intercede with me or talk to me. However, I think they did try to go to my journalism advisor and sort of talk to him verbally, tried to tell him not to pursue the story for various reasons, like students' privacy and things like that.
How much did you rely on your advisor for guidance here? And who was your advisor? Let's get them a shout out.
Yeah, my advisor was Mr. Roy at Milpitas High School. He was incredibly helpful throughout the process of me pursuing the story, especially towards the end, as we needed to kind of, first of all, make sure everything was legally accurate so we couldn't get sued for libel or anything like that. We wanted to make sure that students' privacy was protected. In addition, we had to put in a public records request. In fact, that was how we got the bulk of the information. Without that public records request, we honestly wouldn't have been able to write the story because it would have relied so much on just hearsay kind of. So that public records request, he was instrumental in helping me craft it and then submit it to the district. So he was really helpful throughout the process.
So that was Sanjit Roy, who teaches journalism at Milpitas High School. How popular is the student newspaper there? When you were there, was it considered one of the hot activities?
I wouldn't say.
Come on, what's not hot about journalism? What's not exciting about being on the student newspaper? Yeah, come on, you got to sell it here.
That's what I've been saying all these years. Yeah, no, it wasn't super popular. We printed a certain amount, around I think like 800 to 1,000 copies, and we saw a lot of copies left behind in the classrooms and stuff. But I would say definitely by the time when I published my story, it sort of like blew up really quickly, and that was the first time during lunch that I saw so many people who I knew had never even heard of the union before, like with a physical copy in their hand. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy.
So, what did you find about how the district could handle it, and where did you discover some areas of concern?
Basically, what we discovered was that the district's response and the school's response to these allegations was something that reflected a broader national issue of essentially the district allowed these teachers to kind of negotiate and be let go. They allowed them to resign instead of firing them. And that allowed them to, first of all, be compensated for the time that they were suspended. So that was around tens of thousands of dollars that these teachers were actually paid despite not being in classroom, not teaching any of the students. And they were allowed to resign, which meant that if you search them up on the California, you can search up, I think, teachers on one of the websites. And you can see if they have any red flags, any marks on their record. So when we searched up these teachers, they didn't have that flag on their record, which meant they could be hired again to work at different schools. And we found that that pattern was actually part of a broader national issue where, because although that wasn't legal federally, different states had different, more lenient laws regarding that. So it was a pattern of these teachers being allowed to resign and not really being held accountable for their actions.
We have a pretty big audience of longtime education journalists, and many of them are shaking their heads right now in solidarity with you, Ria. This practice has a name, and it's a terrible name, and it's colloquially called pass the trash. And a lot of districts do it, a lot of states allow it. And I thought the editorial that was written by the union about this was very well done and very well framed, in that the argument was that transparency was better for everyone. If these allegations were serious enough, the teachers should have faced a formal process that would have alerted other districts to a potential problem. And if they were, in fact, innocent of these allegations, if the allegations were not true or did not rise to the level that it should affect their careers, then their names would be cleared in a fair public hearing, or at least a hearing with some transparency.
Yes, absolutely. I think that editorial, it was really important that we wrote that along with the story. It was obviously a difficult sort of balancing act writing the news story because we learned about, journalistic standards of objectivity and fairness and everything. And in writing the story, I was not able to kind of get in contact with and get a statement from the two teachers who faced these allegations. So it was kind of, I was doing my best to be fair and show both sides of the story and make sure that I wasn't portraying anyone in an inaccurate sort of light. But at the same time, obviously, I did have my own opinion about what should have been done and the right steps that should have been taken. And I think it was really important that we had that editorial along with the news story. And I wasn't the one that wrote the editorial, but I worked closely with the writer that did write it.
Ria, I'm wondering what lessons you may have learned from this experience that you think might be valuable for other young people, even if they don't have the opportunity or maybe the interest to be on a student newspaper.
Yes, absolutely. I learned that the First Amendment really does protect your rights, especially in California, even as a student journalist. And you have a lot more freedom and a lot more power to really challenge these like districts, these institutions that seem sort of really difficult to stand up to, and it's possible. And I think I got pretty lucky, honestly, with the way that the process went at my school, where the administration, after those few attempts that I talked about earlier, didn't really step in and do anything super clear to like censor me. They were aware I was pursuing the story at a certain point, and they never reached out to me. Although most of them did decline to talk to me, they didn't try to stop me from writing the story. And I would say it's important to learn that you do have First Amendment protections, and it's very possible to stand up to these institutions. And also, public records from the school and from the city they're out there and you just have to ask for them. And you do have to ask for them in a very specific way. And my advisor and I reached out to a lawyer from the SPLC actually to craft our public records request because there was a lot of like legal jargon and legal nuances into how we had to craft that request in order to get the information that we wanted. And so I would say that there are a lot of free resources out there that students can access and that they should look into if they're interested in doing something like that.
I thought there was also another great teachable moment in there for a lot of people in this 24-hour news cycle world and in this age of a lot of disinformation, and that is you learned rumors are not facts.
Yeah, definitely. So the rumor that kind of like started the whole thing was that some students were saying they saw one of the teachers being escorted by police off campus. And so I was like, "Whoa, like that sounds like a really big deal." And we never really found out whether that was true or not. No one ever sort of confirmed that idea. And there were a lot of rumors circulating. A lot of people were saying some pretty like outlandish things, but it was really through speaking with people that had kind of firsthand experience, the people that were directly impacted by these interactions, that I was able to get to the truth and sort of dispel these rumors with the story. And I think that was really important because when there's like so many rumors going around, they can be, hurtful and spread a lot of disinformation. And I think that's part of why journalism that's accurate is so important because it can really help to avoid that situation.
We're talking about student press freedom this week and why it matters more than ever. Don't miss an episode of EWA Radio. You never have to. You can find us on your favorite podcast app. And thank you very much to everyone who has taken a moment to rate us on Apple Podcasts. Your feedback and suggestions are helping us to grow. We're going to come back to you before we end this episode, but now I want to turn to Mike Hiestand. He's the senior legal counsel for the SPLC. He first joined the organization in 1989. He's played just about every role there, from intern, first legal fellow, and was the full-time staff attorney for more than 20 years. Over those years, he's helped, is this right, Mike? Over 18,000 student journalists and advisors? That's quite a track record.
I think we need to update that number. I think I just passed 20,000. So,
okay,
yeah.
Even better, Mike.
Yeah.
I was looking at your official bio, and it seems like journalism's been your passion and life path from a pretty early age. You were a high school journalist yourself in Alaska?
That's correct. Yeah. It's, I'd always intended to be a journalist, and then took one of those media law classes in college and caught the law bug. So yeah, now I have, I think, probably the best lawyer job in the world because I get to work with folks like with Riya here. So what an incredible story. I mean, that's the sort of stories that we hear, all the time at the SPLC.
What made Riya's situation stand out to you and to SPLC that she merited this inaugural award?
Just that their dog reported. I mean, they stuck with this story. You heard some of the early obstacles they faced here, but they kept at it, and they researched and they found that there were tools like freedom of information law that they could use to kind of go around some of the obstacles that were being presented to them. Mr. Roy and I were on the phone quite a lot, as we were trying to kind of make sure the story was ready. This is the sort of story, Me Too stories have completely changed my life. I mean, just, there is no more sort of advanced level sort of reporting that anybody can do. And, for student journalists to take this on, it could be quite daunting, but they really stuck with it. They got the story right. They got the information that they needed. They talked to the people they needed to talk to. They did good journalism, and the end product was certainly speaks for itself.
We don't know of anybody tracking formally numbers of student journalists who are working right now at the high school and college levels, but anecdotally, what can you tell us about how those numbers have changed compared to maybe 5 or even 10 years ago from the SPLC's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar. It kind of mirrors what we're seeing happening in within the professional ranks. The numbers are going down, which is tragic at a time, where we need journalism. I think, journalism has shown over the last few years, especially, that, boy, we really need it. We really need somebody to tell us the truth, to get out there and report the facts that we all can use. But yeah, no, we're seeing those numbers, and particularly at the college level, we're seeing the newsrooms that maybe had 50 students on staff are now operating on a 5 to 10 staff sort of mode. So it's a little less impact, I think, at the high school level, but we're also seeing some of those numbers go down as well.
In some communities, including my hometown of Ann Arbor, the college newspaper has become the de facto paper of record in a lot of ways, including for covering things like school board elections. What a thing to put on a college student, but also what an important job.
What a lot of responsibility. I mean, I was at a Pew study, I think that it's like, 10 to 15% of state house reporters, the people that are reporting what state legislators are doing, are now student journalists, college student journalists. Even at the high school level, I mean, in many places, yeah, the high school newspaper is the only news media in the area, and so we are seeing student journalists having to pick up that role. It's unfortunate, I mean, because it is a lot of responsibility put on young reporters, but we have folks like Ria that are able to kind of step up and meet that.
Recognizing that the legal protections are very different at the high school level compared to college, I'm wondering what are some misconceptions about student journalism that you can help us dispel about what freedoms are available, maybe specifically to high school students like Ria?
So, I mean, the one big thing I tell everybody, every conference I go to, anybody time I have, reporters on the line, is just to remind them that, at least at a public school, school officials, despite what they might think, they do not have an unlimited license to censor. Now, since 1988, in a U.S. Supreme Court decision, things have changed quite a bit. I mean, in that decision, the Supreme Court really cut back on the First Amendment protections that were available to most high school student journalists. Since that time, we've had states. We have 17 states on the book that have passed laws. They have given students back some of those protections. So when Ria talks about the protections that they have in California, they are unique. We call these laws new voices laws, and they do provide additional protections to high school student journalists. But in many cases, principals do have quite a bit of authority to kill otherwise valid news stories. They don't have unlimited license to censor, but they do have more authority than certainly I think they ought to have in many cases. But yeah, in California and 16 other states, they have legal protections that really do allow them to, as long as they're are practicing, good, solid journalism, they usually have the right to, put those stories in print.
College campuses right now are political minefields. I mean, we talk about the culture wars, we talk about academic freedom being limited in a lot of ways. I'm wondering what kind of requests for help do you normally get, or what's typical right now from a college journalist? What are some of the challenges they're facing?
Oh my goodness. Students are trying. In fact, I was on the phone 2 times this morning talking with students that are getting pushback from trying to cover the conflict in Gaza. It's a hot topic, and trying to report on that in a way that is accurate, is fair, that readers think is fair. It's tough for anybody, but yeah, particularly on college campuses, it seems to be a really difficult sort of thing. Beyond that, I mean, just reporting all the different controversies that are taking place these days on college campuses, rising tuition rates, just all those sorts of things. Students are on the front lines. We have our education writers that are doing the job, but our student reporters are right there in ways sometimes that professional reporters don't have access to. So they're getting down and dirty.
If I'm a working journalist and I want to try to help support student press freedom, what are some options for me?
One thing I love, especially at the high school level, I encourage all student media organizations out there. I ask them to reach out to the local media and invite them into the newsroom so that they can see what it is that they're what it is that student journalists are doing. I think many of them would be surprised just to see the sort of stories that they're covering. And so, having the reporters reach out themselves and say, I'm happy to come in and talk with your students, to work with your students, to provide, advisory capacity or something like that. I think that's all good stuff. I mean, we all benefit. We need journalists. We desperately need journalists, and unless we you don't just flip a switch and all of a sudden you have them, and you gotta train them. You gotta bring them up in that.
Ria, I know you're still thinking about what might be ahead for your future, and you're majoring in sociology at Berkeley, correct?
Yes, I'm planning on double majoring in sociology and political science, and I just declared my major in sociology a couple weeks ago.
Fantastic. Well, journalism could still potentially be on the path ahead of you, but I'm wondering what skills or qualities do you think you have now, having had the student journalist experience, that you're going to carry forward with you into other parts of your work?
One of the main skills and sort of ways of thinking that I picked up from journalism is not something I can't really turn off anymore. It's like not taking information for granted, especially information that, you know, uh, authority figures will tell you. And it's kind of always like questioning and interrogating whatever has been presented to you and digging kind of deeper for the truth. And I think that's important regardless of what career I go into or what career anyone goes into. I think it's a way that my mindset has kind of shifted.
That's really valuable to hear, Rian. I'm really glad that you got that experience. Mike, I'd love to see more college students, high school students get this opportunity.
Absolutely, and we need it. I mean, and like I said, we need the next generation of journalists to be ready to step in and do that. And we also find, in many cases, student journalism is kind of the civics education come to life. It really is where a lot of students are getting that sort of experience with understanding. Why is a press even important? Why is it worth supporting? We are not the enemy of the people. We are, the absolute opposite of that. And I think that, that's a message that we can kind of bring to students in a way in a student journalism setting that maybe doesn't present itself in other places.
Sunshine is the best disinfectant, eh, Mike?
Amen. Amen.
Amen. And Ria, thank you so much for making time for EWA Radio. We wish you the best of luck out there at UC Berkeley.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really fun talking to you guys, and I think I learned a lot.
Mike Hiestand of SPLC, thank you for making time for us as well.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
And that wraps up another episode for us. If there's a story or reporter you want to know more about, drop us a line at radio@ewa.org. I wanted to mention I will be in Austin, Texas for South by Southwest EDU, and that's March 4th, 5th, and 6th. If you are there as well, please come find me. We'll be doing a live recording of EWA Radio on Wednesday, March 6th at 11:30 a.m. Texas time. If you'd like to join EWA at our national seminar in Las Vegas, Nevada, May 29th through June 1st, take a look at our website. All the details are there, ewa.org. Have a great week, take good care of yourselves, and thank you for listening.